That's absolutely right. Only 0.2% of foreign direct investment in Canada is from Saudi Arabia. In the other direction, 0.01%, that's 1/100% of Canada's foreign direct investment is in Saudi Arabia. It only accounts for 3% of Canada's global trade. Canada and the US trade in 2 days as much as Canada and the US trade in an entire year. This wasn't picked because it would have a massive economic impact. Rather, it was picked specifically because it wouldn't have a massive economic impact on either party. In the end, the only people this really damages in an immediate way are Saudi citizens that are living and studying in Canada who have been forced to leave the country, or have been requested by their home government to leave the country and settled in other countries. There's an element of disruption there. The economic impact to Saudi Arabia and to Canada will be relatively minimal. But Canada is a country that has a strong reputation, or a very significant reputation, of speaking up in defense of what they see as human rights activists, particularly when they're detained. Now, Germany has done the same, Sweden has done the same. The UK and the US are unlikely to back Canada in this particular instance because they have too many ties. And so by doing this way, by targeting Canada, Saudi Arabia has taken a relatively safe approach to telling foreign countries, don't interfere with our domestic affairs, and seeming decisive on the domestic stage.
Good point you raise around that, but this sort of opens the idea about leverage and who's got the leverage. I mean, Saudi Arabia clearly has deep pockets, but so too do the Canadians when you think about all the pension funds that exist in Canada and the sovereign wealth funds as well, that they can put money to work at home. Is that a point of leverage when you do have discussions like this and there are threats to pull money out of key projects?
Saudi Arabia is opening right now. And so of course there are opportunities there for foreign companies to come in and assist and invest and in some cases execute these projects. Now those avenues are currently closed to Canada, which is one of the main economic impacts on Canadian firms. That said, the amount of leverage that the Saudis actually have in Canada, as mentioned, it's 0.2% of FDI in the country. There are so few holdings that in the end it doesn't make much of a difference. The lion's share of media coverage over the last few days has been focused on the economic impact and the decline in the dollar that immediately took place in markets, but the dollar actually closed up on the day because ultimately they only hold 10 to 25 billion in Canadian reserves, and the amount of, so only roughly 1% of foreign holdings of Canadian equities and debt are held by the Saudi Central Bank. In the end, it's more of a tempest in a teapot than anything else.
It's interesting, though, from the perspective of how Mohammed bin Salman is developing his control over Saudi society. And I don't think he's done too much wrong so far in terms of how the West has received the opening up and the perception that Saudi Arabia is moving in a direction that brings it closer politically, culturally and economically to the West. But this story suggests there is a brittleness, a sensitivity in the government to criticism. Should we be concerned that it indicates perhaps some weaknesses or flaws in the leadership in Saudi Arabia, and that if we're going to get muscular foreign policy every time somebody says something bad about the country, we're going to see Saudi Arabia in the news a lot for the wrong reasons?
Well, that's why the targeting of Canada is so particularly interesting, because ultimately, they are in some ways changing their attitude towards women and other social issues which are controversial in the country. Now, when Canada comes out and criticizes the arrest of an activist, domestically speaking, Mohammed bin Salman has to face the fact that these changes aren't universally popular, and by warding off any sort of criticism, he enables himself to undertake the reforms that he wishes to undertake when he wishes to undertake them. And ultimately, it's not the US, it's not the UK that have suffered these consequences. It's a country which is where the economic damage on both sides is relatively survivable.
So you're suggesting it's a bit of a phony war here. So this is for a domestic constituency to show that he's a strong man, and maybe for Trump to see that bin Salman is equivalent. He can also lay it down if he needs to.
He can lay it down, and he's willing to undertake actions that are seen as dramatic by the world stage and are relatively dramatic. I mean, declaring the ambassador persona non grata, of course, is a major action. Of course, the ambassador is set to embark on a new posting next month anyway, but that doesn't matter. Declaring an ambassador PNG is a big deal, diplomatically speaking. That said, these openings that are coming towards Saudi Arabia are being welcomed by the UK and the US and Canada and the rest of the world stage. And that is being, this is an easy way, for an effective way, for Mohammed bin Salman to say to the global partners, please don't criticize our domestic affairs. To domestic audience, I am decisive, while keeping the economic impact relatively muted.
Right, Scott, just quickly while you're still with us, do you want to just give us a quick reading on how Justin Trudeau is being perceived now on foreign policy? Because obviously a clash with President Trump recently around some key policy measures, and now on the international stage yet again, this time with Saudi Arabia, a little bit further from home. So how's the perception of his handling of foreign policy?
So certainly there are certain constituencies within Canada that criticize the Trudeau administration, if you wish to call it that, on what they call virtue signaling. But what really it comes down to is the Canadian government's, as they see it, principled stance on human rights and foreign affairs abroad, and the willingness to put principle first. Now that is not universally accepted, but some of the actions we've seen recently to say, well, you know, there are issues in Canada as well, so why don't we look at those? That evokes almost universally negative reaction from Canadians who tend to band together at these moments.
Hey everybody, it's Hadley Gamble from our new CNBC Middle East Bureau in Abu Dhabi. Thanks for stopping by. Now to watch more, you can try one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. And don't forget to subscribe.